Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So for a lot of different reasons, this week's Parsha is a feel-good Parsha, right? It's a feel-good Parsha. For one of the reasons, actually, Paige will be talking about that as part of her Haftarah speech when she talks about Nachamu Ami and this idea of comfort. But for the other parts of this, when we look at the Torah portion, it's a feel-good Parsha because it's very familiar. We get to certain sections of our Torah and we read them and we feel like the words are strange and it's not the way we think about the world. It's not something we hear about every day. But in this week's Parsha, the words, and especially what we're reading today, are super, super familiar. We are going to be reading two sections in today's reading. One, the very first aliyah, is the Ten Commandments. And then for the fifth aliyah, we're going to be reading the Shema and Ve'ahavta. Both of those happen within a chapter of one another. And so my first question for today is, other than the fact that they appear within a chapter of one another, what is the connection between the Ten Commandments and the Shema? What is the connection for us as Jews between the Ten Commandments and the Shema? Milt.
Shema reminds us to observe the commandments that we have received with love.
Okay. So the Shema reminds us to observe the commandments that we've received, and it reminds us to do it with love. Good. What else?
Perhaps if we believe the words of Shema, then that would lead us to.
So perhaps if we believe the words of the Shema, if we take that fundamental declaration of faith, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone, or the Lord is one, however you want to translate that last portion, perhaps if we really took that to heart, the Ten Commandments would be a lot easier for us to think about. Okay? What else? What's the connection? Well, there are a few of them. First of all, we have to understand that originally they were both turned into a fundamental part of our liturgy, right? We read the Shema twice a day, morning and night, just like it tells us to. So we read it as part of the Shacharit service. That's what we did not too long ago with Tom leading us. And then as part of the evening service, we read the Shema as well. Now you may be saying to me, but Rabbi Kornberg, we don't read the Ten Commandments as part of our liturgy. And that is true, but we used to. The Talmud actually is very clear about the fact that we used to read the Ten Commandments every day as part of our liturgical reading, as part of our prayer service. But we stopped reading that actually because of other religions that basically came along and said, well, 613 commandments, you don't really need to do all 613 commandments. All you need to focus on are the 10 commandments, right? The rest of the commandments, you don't really need to focus on, right? The other 603. And so the response that the rabbis had to that was to actually remove the 10 commandments from our liturgy to say, these aren't the most important commandments. All 613 are important, and we're not going to highlight these 10 any differently than we would highlight any other ones. And the Talmud actually describes that. Another piece and another connection is the Jerusalem Talmud actually comes and says, well, we don't need to recite the 10 Commandments because the 10 Commandments are actually included in the paragraph of the Shema. And in a fairly long excursus, it goes through and connects each of the 10 Commandments to a verse or some words within the Shema and Ve'ahavta, and makes those connections. So the Jerusalem Talmud says we don't need to say the Ten Commandments in its entirety because we sort of have this shorthand way of saying it in the paragraph of the Shema. But I like, Marge, where you were going with this, that there is an emotional or a spiritual connection, right, that is between the two of them. And one of the things that Rabbi Sachs teaches on this particular parsha, he really leans into the idea, not only here, but throughout Deuteronomy, of love, right? He leans into the idea of love. The second verse of the Shema, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. The idea of love is actually found the most within Deuteronomy, right? He actually says it appears twice in Exodus, twice in Leviticus. Numbers, it doesn't appear at all. And in Deuteronomy, it appears 23 times. A big difference. So he starts talking about this idea of love vis-a-vis the commandments. And he shapes it in an interesting way. Because in order to maintain a loving relationship, we have to have some sort of structure. So Debbie and I celebrated yesterday 32 years of marriage. Yesterday was our anniversary, right? It's not enough just to say we love each other, right? Anybody who's been married more than about 30 seconds knows that, right? It's not enough. What did we do over the 32 years? We built a structure that helps us express that helps us nurture that helps us promote that helps us remember that, because in some moments, it's hard to remember sometimes, right? We all have those moments. And the same thing is true in dealing with our relationship with God, right? It's one thing to say, you shall love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your heart, with all your might, but what does that mean? How do you do that? And from a Jewish perspective, and especially from the perspective of Deuteronomy, we do that by creating a structure, by building the work, the scaffolding of the relationship through these interactions that we have. And for us and God, those are the mitzvot. Rabbi Sachs actually says something in a very poetic sort of way, as he often does. He says, emotional state cannot be guaranteed forever, right? We fall in love with somebody, but doesn't mean it's going to be there forever. He says, we wed in poetry, but we stay married in prose. And I love that. We wed in poetry, we stay married in prose. There are moments in our lives that just have that magic, right? That just have that spiritual, uplifting, poetic, miraculous moment. But that's not all of our lives. And that's not even most of our lives. Where we live our lives is in the day-to-day rituals, the day-to-day actions that we do. And that is true whether we're talking about a marriage or whether we're talking about our relationship to Judaism. And so I think one of the things that Moshe is trying to get across to us here by bringing the Ten Commandments and the Shema so close together is that they are inseparable. To live life as a Jew, we need to live the Shema life, and we need to live the Ten Commandments life. We need to live in the poetry, and we need to live in the prose. And if we can do that, we have the benefits of both, and we eliminate the problems of having only one or the other. Right? If all we do is live in the poetry, live in the magic moments, well, those magic moments go away, and the relationship ultimately ends. By the same token, if all we do is just go through the rituals, go through the actions, and don't infuse that with some of the poetry, some of the love that we hear 23 times in Deuteronomy, the relationship goes away. We need both. That is the message of today's Parsha, and it's actually the message, I would argue, of the entire book of Deuteronomy, as Moshe is trying to remind the children of Israel that it's going to take both of those sides to continue their relationship with God as they go into the land. Shabbat Shalom.